The knife was still warm from her brother's blood when Nadia Graves swore she would carve the Vampire King's heart from his chest and watch it turn to ash. She stood in the ruins of what had been the Graves compound, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Seattle that had housed 3 generations of vampire hunters. Now it was nothing but scorched earth and broken bodies. The attack had come at dawn, which should have been impossible. Vampires couldn't move in daylight. That was the one absolute rule that had kept humanity safe for centuries. But somehow Gavril Illyrian and his coven had walked through the morning sun like it was nothing more than a mild inconvenience, and they had slaughtered everyone Nadia had ever loved. Almost everyone. She had survived because she'd been in the underground armory, 3 levels below ground, cataloging the new shipment of blessed silver weapons. She'd heard the screams, felt the building shake, smelled the smoke. By the time she'd fought her way to the surface, it was over. 23 hunters dead. Her father, Marcus Graves, the clan leader, lay sprawled across the front steps with his throat torn out. Her mother had been drained so completely her body had withered to a husk. And David, her brilliant, gentle older brother who'd never wanted to be a hunter in the first place, had been impaled on the iron fence surrounding the property, left on display like a gruesome warning. Nadia had fallen to her knees in the ash and blood and made her vow. The Vampire King would die by her hand, no matter what it cost her. That had been 6 months ago. Now she stood outside Club Nocturne, the most exclusive vampire establishment in Seattle, wearing a black dress that clung to her curves and heels that could double as weapons. Her long dark hair fell in waves down her back, and she'd lined her brown eyes with kohl until they looked dangerous. She didn't look like a hunter tonight, she looked like prey, exactly as she'd intended. Getting into Club Nocturne wasn't easy for humans. The establishment catered exclusively to vampires and their willing donors, those humans addicted to the euphoric high that came from a vampire's bite. But Nadia had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. She'd tracked down a former donor who'd fallen out of favor with her vampire patron, stolen the woman's credentials, and used her brother's hacking skills taught to Nadia in what felt like another lifetime to alter the identification to match her own face. The bouncer at the door was a vampire, naturally, they always were. He had the telltale pale skin and white hair that marked his kind, though he'd styled it in a modern undercut that almost made him look human. Almost. His eyes gave him away. They were too bright, too aware, with an unsettling crimson tint that marked him as well-fed. He scanned her ID with a device that looked like a smartphone but glowed with an eerie blue light. Nadia forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her heartbeat steady. Vampires could hear the rhythm of human blood, could sense fear like sharks scenting blood in water. "First time at Nocturne?" the bouncer asked, his voice carrying the faint accent of someone who'd been born centuries ago, before modern English had smoothed out all the interesting variations. "Yes," Nadia said, letting her voice tremble just slightly. "I'm nervous." The vampire smiled, revealing fangs. "Don't be. We take excellent care of our donors here. The king himself ensures it." Nadia's hand twitched toward the silver knife hidden in her clutch, but she controlled herself. Not yet, not here. She needed to get inside, get close, learn the layout of Gavril Illyrian's operation. Revenge required patience. The bouncer waved her through, and Nadia stepped into another world. Club Nocturne was stunning in the way that predatory things often were. The main room was vast, with soaring ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the space, refracting off mirrored walls that made the room seem infinite. The furniture was all deep burgundy and black, plush and inviting. Music thrummed through the space, something electronic and hypnotic that seemed to sync with Nadia's heartbeat. And everywhere vampires. They moved through the crowd with inhuman grace, their pale skin and white hair making them stand out like ghosts among the humans. Some sat in intimate booths with their donors, fangs buried in willing throats while the humans gasped in ecstasy. Others stood in groups, drinking blood wine from crystal glasses and watching the crowd with ancient, calculating eyes. Nadia had seen vampires before, of course. She'd killed 17 of them over her years as a hunter, though most had been young ones, feral and stupid. These were different. These were educated, controlled, powerful. These were the vampires who'd learned to blend into modern society, who owned businesses and influenced politics and pretended to be civilized. She made her way to the bar, hyper-aware of the eyes tracking her movement. Fresh human blood always drew attention in places like this. The bartender was human, surprisingly, though the scars on his neck suggested he was also a donor. "What can I get you?" he asked, his voice flat and dreamy. He was lost in the addiction already, Nadia realized. He'd probably been beautiful once, but the constant blood loss had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed. "Something strong," Nadia said. He mixed her a drink that glowed faintly purple. "Vampire's kiss," he said. "It won't hurt you, just herbs and liquor. But it'll help you relax." Nadia accepted the glass but didn't drink. She needed all her wits about her tonight. "Looking for someone?" The voice came from behind her, smooth and cultured and ancient. Nadia turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral, and found herself face to face with a vampire who radiated power like most people radiated heat. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with the characteristic pale skin and white hair of his kind. But where most vampires' hair was merely white, his seemed to glow silver in the dim light, falling in perfectly styled waves to his shoulders. He wore an immaculately tailored black suit that probably cost more than a car, and his eyes were the deep crimson of fresh blood. His features were sharp and aristocratic, all high cheekbones and strong jaw, and there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested absolute authority. Nadia's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen pictures of Gavril Illyrian, of course. Surveillance photos, old paintings, sketches from Hunter archives. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of him. He was devastating. Beautiful in the way that natural disasters were beautiful, awe-inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. "I'm just exploring," Nadia said carefully, painfully aware that this was the man who'd murdered her family. She wanted to lunge for him, to drive her hidden knife into his chest, but she'd never make it. He was too fast, too strong, and they were surrounded by his coven. "Exploring," Gavril repeated, amusement flickering across his perfect features. How delightfully vague. He moved closer, and Nadia caught his scent, something dark and spicy like incense and old libraries. "You're new, I would have remembered you." "Is that a line?" Nadia asked, surprising herself with her boldness. But hunters learned early to project confidence around vampires. They could smell weakness like blood. Gavril laughed, a sound that seemed to resonate in Nadia's chest. "It's an observation. I own this establishment. I know everyone who walks through those doors." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And you, little dove, are not what you claim to be." Nadia's heart stuttered. Had he recognized her? Impossible. She'd been careful, so careful. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Your identification says you're a registered donor, but your neck is unmarked, your wrists, too." Gavril reached out and took her hand, his touch cold and impossibly gentle. He turned her wrist up, exposing the pulse point there. "No vampire has fed from you. So either you're a virgin donor, which is rare and valuable, or you're lying about why you're here." "Maybe I'm looking for the right vampire," Nadia said, meeting his blood-red eyes directly. It was risky challenging him like this, but backing down would be worse. Something flickered in Gavril's expression. "Interest, hunger, is that so?" Before Nadia could respond, another vampire appeared at Gavril's side. This one was female, beautiful and deadly, with white hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes like chips of ice. "My king," she said, her voice carrying a subtle warning, "we have business to attend to." "Later, Cassandra," Gavril said without looking away from Nadia. "It concerns the Hunter clans." Cassandra pressed. "The Blackthorns are asking questions about the Graves compound attack." Nadia went very still. She forced herself not to react, not to show the rage and grief that mention of her family's massacre triggered. Gavril finally looked at Cassandra, his expression cooling several degrees. "I said later." The words were soft, but they carried absolute authority. Cassandra bowed her head and stepped back, though her ice-chip eyes darted to Nadia with obvious suspicion. "Hunter clans?" Nadia asked, as if the term meant nothing to her. "Like vampire hunters, a dying breed," Gavril said dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry about, little dove." He released her wrist but didn't step back, still occupying her personal space, in a way that would have been threatening from anyone else. From him it was almost intimate. "I'd like to continue this conversation somewhere more private. Would you join me in my office?" Everything in Nadia's hunter training screamed at her to refuse. Going alone with the Vampire King was suicide. But she'd come here for information, for access, for a chance to get close enough to strike. She might not get another opportunity like this. "All right," she said. Gavril's smile was slow and dangerous. He offered her his arm like a gentleman from another century. And Nadia took it, hyper-aware of the supernatural strength coiled beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. He led her through the club, past the booths of feeding vampires and willing donors, through a door marked private, and up a spiral staircase that seemed to climb forever. His office was nothing like Nadia expected. She'd imagined something cold and minimalist, all modern lines and threatening shadows. Instead, it was warm and lived in, filled with books and art. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves holding volumes in dozens of languages, some so old their spines had cracked and faded. Paintings hung in the spaces between the books, real paintings, not prints, ranging from medieval religious icons to contemporary abstracts. A massive desk dominated one side of the room, its surface organized but not obsessively so, and on the far wall, floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Seattle's skyline, the city lights twinkling like grounded stars. "You're surprised," Gavril observed, closing the door behind them. Nadia heard the lock click and had to suppress a flinch. "I expected something more," she gestured vaguely. "Vampiric?" Gavril suggested with amusement. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a crystal decanter filled with dark red liquid. "We've been dealing with stereotypes for centuries. Yes, I'm a vampire. No, I don't sleep in a coffin or turn into a bat. I'm a businessman and a leader, and I prefer comfort to theatrics." He poured himself a glass of what was definitely blood wine and turned to face her. "Now why don't you tell me who you really are?" Nadia's hand moved toward her clutch, where the silver knife waited. "I told you, I'm a donor." "You're a liar," Gavril said pleasantly. He took a sip of his drink, his movements unhurried and confident. "A beautiful one, I'll grant you, but a liar nonetheless. Your heart races, but not with desire or fear of feeding. You carry yourself like a fighter, and your eyes." He moved closer, studying her with unnerving intensity. "Your eyes look at me like you want to kill me." Nadia's fingers closed around the knife in her clutch. "Maybe I do." She moved fast, hunter-trained reflexes guiding her strike. The silver blade flashed toward Gavril's chest, aimed for his heart with killing precision. But he was faster, impossibly faster. His hand caught her wrist mid-strike, stopping the blade inches from his body. His grip was like iron, cold and unbreakable. "Silver," Gavril observed, examining the knife. "Blessed if I'm not mistaken. And you know exactly where a vampire's heart is located." His crimson eyes locked onto hers. "You're a hunter." Nadia tried to wrench free, but it was like fighting against stone. "You murdered my family," she hissed, abandoning all pretense. "My father, my mother, my brother. 23 people slaughtered in the daylight when you shouldn't have been able to walk in the sun. You destroyed the Graves clan, and I swore I would kill you for it." Understanding dawned in Gavril's expression, followed by something that might have been surprise. "Graves. You're a Graves." He released her wrist and Nadia stumbled back, clutching her knife. But Gavril made no move to attack. Instead, he set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "I didn't attack your compound, liar," Nadia spat. "Survivors saw you, saw your coven, saw vampires walking in daylight." "Then your survivors were mistaken or plants," Gavril said calmly. "I was in Europe 6 months ago, negotiating a treaty with the Old World covens. I have a dozen witnesses, human and vampire, who can confirm my location. And as for walking in daylight," he laughed, "but there was no humor in it. Do I look suicidal to you? Even I would burn in direct sunlight. No vampire has overcome that weakness." Nadia wanted to believe he was lying, wanted to cling to the certainty that had fueled her for 6 months. But there was something in his voice, in his eyes, that gave her pause. "If it wasn't you, then who?" "That," Gavril said quietly, "is an excellent question. One I've been trying to answer myself." He moved to his desk and pulled out a file folder which he tossed to Nadia. She caught it reflexively, her knife still clutched in her other hand. "Open it." Warily, Nadia flipped open the folder. Inside were photographs and reports, all detailing vampire attacks on hunter clans. She recognized some of the locations: the Blackthorn compound in Boston, the Chen family in San Francisco, the Volkov hunters in Alaska. All attacked in daylight, all massacred, all blamed on Gavril Illyrian and his coven. 7 major hunter clans destroyed in the last year, Gavril said, all attacked at dawn. All attributed to me, but I didn't order any of these attacks. Someone is systematically wiping out the hunter clans and making it look like I'm responsible. Why would anyone do that? Nadia demanded, though her mind was already racing through the possibilities. If Gavril was telling the truth, and that was still a massive if, then someone was orchestrating a war between vampires and hunters. To destabilize the balance, Gavril said. For the last century, hunters and vampires have maintained a careful peace. We don't hunt humans indiscriminately, and hunters only target vampires who break our laws. It's imperfect, but it's kept large-scale violence to a minimum. If that peace collapses, if hunters and vampires go to war, he shook his head, the casualties would be devastating on both sides. And in the chaos, someone could seize power. Nadia's grip on her knife loosened slightly. Everything he was saying made a terrible kind of sense. Her father had always maintained that the peace with vampires was fragile but necessary. Marcus Graves had believed in rules, in order, in the careful balance that kept humanity safe without resorting to genocide. He'd had enemies within the hunter community, extremists who thought the only good vampire was a dead vampire. But he'd also had enemies among vampires, traditionalists who thought the modern treaty was a sign of weakness. You still could have ordered the attacks, Nadia said, though her voice lacked conviction it had held moments ago. This could all be an elaborate cover. It could be, Gavril agreed. But if I wanted to destroy the hunter clans, why would I do it so publicly? Why would I leave survivors to spread stories about me? Why would I risk United Hunter retaliation? He moved closer to her again, and this time Nadia didn't step back. I'm the Vampire King. I rule the Western Covens absolutely. If I wanted to start a war with hunters, I would do it efficiently and completely. I certainly wouldn't leave Marcus Graves' daughter alive to come hunting me. How do you know who my father was? Nadia asked. Because I met with him regularly, Gavril said, and now there was genuine sadness in his voice. Your father and I maintained diplomatic relations for over a decade. He was a good man. Honorable. We didn't always agree, but we respected each other. When I heard about the attack on his compound, I was furious. Not because I'd been framed, but because someone had murdered a man I considered an ally. Nadia felt her carefully constructed world tilting sideways. Her father had met with Gavril Illyrian, had considered him an ally. Why had he never told her? But even as she asked herself the question, she knew the answer. Because she'd been young and hot-headed, more interested in killing vampires than talking to them. David had known. Her gentle diplomatic brother had probably attended those meetings, had probably understood the complex politics that Nadia had always dismissed as weakness. God, she missed David. I need proof, Nadia said finally, lowering her knife but not sheathing it. If you didn't attack my family, prove it. I'll do better than that, Gavril said. I'll help you find out who did. He extended his hand, a formal gesture. You want revenge, Nadia Graves. So, do I? Someone has murdered people under my protection, framed me for atrocities, and threatened the peace I've spent decades building. Work with me. Help me find the real culprit, and when we do, you can have your vengeance. Nadia stared at his outstretched hand. Everything in her hunter training told her to refuse, to drive her knife into his chest and take her chances with his coven. But her father's training, the lessons in strategy and politics that she'd always found boring, whispered different advice. The enemy of my enemy is my ally, and if Gavril was telling the truth, then the real enemy was still out there, still killing. She took his hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was firm. If you're lying to me, Nadia said quietly, I will find a way to kill you. Gavril's smile was genuine this time, showing fangs. I'd expect nothing less. Over the next 3 weeks, Nadia found herself drawn into a world she'd never imagined existed. Gavril didn't just rule a coven, he commanded an empire. The vampire courts were organized like medieval kingdoms, with houses and allegiances and complex political structures that made human governments look simple by comparison. As king of the Western territories, Gavril oversaw dozens of covens, mediated disputes, enforced laws, and maintained diplomatic relations with vampire rulers across the globe. He worked from a mansion hidden beneath the city, accessible only through a series of tunnels that connected to Club Nocturne and other vampire establishments. The mansion itself was stunning, a Gothic masterpiece of stone and stained glass, transplanted piece by piece from Romania in the 19th century and reconstructed underground. Nadia had expected it to feel like a tomb, but magical lighting systems and careful architecture made it feel open and alive, if somewhat otherworldly. Gavril had given her access to everything. Files on vampire politics, records of recent attacks, intelligence networks that spanned continents. Cassandra, his second-in-command, clearly didn't trust Nadia and made her feelings known with icy glares and pointed comments. But Gavril had declared Nadia under his protection, which apparently meant something significant in vampire culture. Because even Cassandra didn't challenge the arrangement directly. Nadia spent her days poring over records and her nights attending vampire court sessions, watching Gavril govern. He was brilliant, she realized reluctantly. Ruthless when necessary but fair, quick to listen and slow to judge. He commanded absolute loyalty from his people, not through fear but through respect. Even the vampires who challenged him, and there were several, did so with acknowledgement of his authority. And he was disturbingly easy to be around. Nadia had expected to hate every moment of working with Gavril. Instead, she found herself fascinated by him. He was educated in ways that put her own university degree to shame, could discuss philosophy and art and history with equal passion. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh despite herself. And he treated her as an equal, not as a weak human or a potential meal, but as a partner in investigation. Look at this, Nadia said one evening, spread out on the floor of Gavril's library with files scattered around her. They'd been working for hours, cross-referencing attack patterns and survivor testimonies. The attacks always happen within 3 days of a new moon, and they're all on compounds located near major metropolitan areas. Gavril looked up from the ancient tome he'd been reading, his crimson eyes focusing on her with unsettling intensity. He did that, sometimes went utterly still in a way no human could, and just watched her. It should have been creepy. Instead, it made Nadia's heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. New moon, Gavril repeated thoughtfully. He rose from his chair and came to kneel beside her, studying the map she'd marked. That's when our power is weakest, old magic tied to lunar cycles. But it's also when certain spells are most potent. His finger traced the pattern of attacks. These aren't random targets. Someone is hitting the hunter clans who were most allied with the vampire courts. Your father, the Blackthorns, the Chens, all of them advocated for peace. Leaving only the extremists, Nadia said, following his logic. The hunters who want to exterminate all vampires, regardless of whether they've broken any laws. And making it look like I'm the aggressor, Gavril added, which would push even the moderate hunters toward extremism. He sat back on his heels, his expression grim. It's elegant, evil but elegant. We need to figure out how they're walking in daylight, Nadia said. That's the key. Vampires can't survive sunlight. It's the one absolute. Almost absolute, Gavril corrected. There are legends of vampires who overcame the sun's weakness, but they're just that, legends. The magic required would be, he trailed off, his eyes widening slightly. Blood of the innocent. What? Gavril stood and began pulling books from the shelves with preternatural speed, moving so fast he was almost a blur. It's an old ritual, forbidden by every vampire court for good reason. You take the blood of someone truly innocent. A child is traditional, but the definition can vary, and you consume it at the moment of their death. The magic in innocent blood can temporarily grant immunity to our weaknesses. Nadia felt sick. How temporarily? A few hours at most, and the cost is significant. The vampire who performs the ritual becomes marked, twisted. They lose their higher reasoning, become little more than beasts. Gavril found the book he was looking for and flipped through pages covered in archaic script. But if someone had found a way to refine the ritual, to extend its effects without the psychological cost, then they could create an army of daywalkers, Nadia finished. Vampires who could attack hunters at dawn, when they're most vulnerable and least expecting an attack. We need to find out who has access to this kind of knowledge, Gavril said. The ritual is described in fewer than a dozen texts worldwide, and most of them are held by the Old World covens. Could it be one of them? Nadia asked. One of the European vampire kings trying to undermine your authority? Possible, Gavril admitted. But unlikely. The Old World covens benefit from stability in the Americas. If the hunter clans and vampire courts go to war here, the chaos could spread globally. He closed the book carefully. No, this feels personal. Someone who wants to destroy me specifically. Over the following days, they narrowed down the list of suspects. It wasn't easy. Gavril had ruled for over 2 centuries, and vampires held grudges that could last millennia. But most of his enemies were either dead, exiled, or too weak to orchestrate something this complex. They were left with 3 real possibilities. Lucian Constantine, an ancient vampire who'd challenged Gab for the crown 50 years ago and lost. Seraphine Moreau, a vampire sorceress who'd been exiled for experimenting with forbidden magic. And Theron Ashcroft, Gavril's own brother, who'd left the court decades ago after a bitter dispute. Tell me about Theron, Nadia said one night. They were in Gavril's private quarters, a space Nadia had been surprised to be invited into. It was more personal than his office, filled with objects that clearly held meaning: a medieval sword mounted on the wall, a painting of a woman who looked like she was from the Renaissance, a shelf of what looked like children's toys from various eras. Gavril was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fireplace that provided more ambiance than heat. Theron is my younger brother. Not by blood, we were both turned by the same sire, but that bond is just as strong among vampires, or stronger sometimes. He looked tired, Nadia realized. She'd never seen him look tired before. He believed I was too soft on humans, thought the treaties and rules were weakness. He wanted to return to the old ways, when vampires hunted openly and humans lived in terror. What happened? Nadia asked gently. I exiled him, gave him a choice: accept my authority and the laws I'd established, or leave the territory. Gavril's hands clenched. He chose to leave, swore he'd return one day and show me the error of my ways. That was 60 years ago. I haven't seen him since. If he's behind this, he'd need resources, Nadia said. A coven of his own, access to forbidden knowledge, victims for the ritual. Theron was always brilliant, Gavril said quietly. More than I gave him credit for. If anyone could pull this off, it would be him. Before Nadia could respond, the door burst open. Cassandra stood there, her usual icy composure cracked by urgency. My king, we have a problem. The Blackthorn hunters are here. They're demanding an audience, and they're armed. Gavril was on his feet instantly, all trace of weariness gone. How many? 12. Led by Catherine Blackthorn herself. Nadia's blood ran cold. Catherine Blackthorn was a legend among hunters, a ruthless warrior who'd killed more vampires than anyone in the last century. If she was here at the vampire court, armed and demanding an audience, it meant the peace was about to shatter. "I'll handle this," Gavril said. "Cassandra, alert our security. No violence unless I give the order." "Nadia, I'm coming with you," Nadia interrupted. "Catherine knew my father, she might listen to me." Gavril looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "Stay close to me. If this goes wrong, it will go wrong quickly." They descended to the main hall, a cavernous space that served as the throne room for Vampire Court. Gavril's coven was already gathering, dozens of vampires taking up positions around the room. They were trying to look casual, but Nadia could see the tension in every line of their bodies. One wrong word, one wrong move, and this would turn into a bloodbath. The Blackthorn hunters stood in the center of the hall, a tight formation of leather and weapons. They carried silver stakes, blessed blades, even what looked like modern firearms modified to shoot wooden bullets. And at their center stood Catherine Blackthorn herself, a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. "Gavril Illyrian," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I'm here to deliver a message from the United Hunter Council. You have 1 week to surrender yourself for trial, or we will consider your entire coven complicit in the massacre of peaceful hunter communities. War will follow." "I didn't attack those communities," Gavril said calmly, though Nadia could feel the power radiating from him, could see how every vampire in the room responded to their king's authority. "I've been framed, you'll forgive me if I don't take your word for it," Catherine said coldly. "We have witnesses, we have evidence. 7 clans destroyed, hundreds dead, all blamed on you." "It's Blackthorn," Nadia said, stepping forward. She felt Gavril tense beside her, protective instinct warring with political necessity. "It's me, Nadia Graves." Catherine's hard expression flickered with surprise. "Nadia, we thought you were dead. We found your name on the casualty list for the Graves compound. I survived, and I've been investigating my family's murder. Gavril didn't order those attacks." Nadia moved to stand between the hunters and the vampires, a human bridge between two worlds. "Someone is framing him. Someone who wants to start a war between our people. And you believe him?" Catherine demanded. "He's the Vampire King, Nadia, your father's murderer." "My father worked with Gavril," Nadia said, the words coming out stronger than she felt. "They maintained diplomatic relations for years. Dad believed in the peace, in the balance. He wouldn't want me to throw that away for revenge." "Your father is dead because of that belief," Catherine said harshly. "Maybe it's time we accepted that vampires can't be trusted, or maybe it's time we asked who benefits from making you think that." Nadia shot back. "Catherine, please, give us time to find the real culprit. Don't let them manipulate you into a war nobody wants." For a long moment Catherine was silent. The tension in the room was so thick Nadia could barely breathe. Then the older hunter sighed, and some of the hardness left her expression. "Your father was my friend," she said quietly. "One of the best men I knew. If he trusted Illyrian, that means something." She looked past Nadia to Gavril. "You have 2 weeks. Find your evidence. Prove your innocence. But if you can't, the council will move forward with full retaliation." "That's fair," Gavril said, inclining his head in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Catherine Blackthorn. You have my word that the truth will be uncovered." Catherine nodded curtly, then gestured for her hunters to fall back. They filed out of the hall in distant formation, weapons still at the ready but no longer actively threatening. When the last hunter had disappeared up the tunnel leading to the surface, the entire room seemed to exhale. "Well," Cassandra said dryly, "that went better than expected." 2 weeks, Gavril said, his voice tight with controlled tension. "We have 2 weeks to solve a mystery that stumped us for months, or we're all going to war. Then we'd better get back to work," Nadia said. The breakthrough came 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, when Nadia was so tired she was seeing double. She'd been cross-referencing financial records following Gavril's suggestion that they track unusual purchases of rare magical components when she noticed a pattern. A shell company based in Portland had been buying up ingredients used in blood rituals. Individually, the purchases were innocuous. Together they painted a damning picture. "Gavril," Nadia called out, her exhaustion forgotten. "I found something." He appeared at her side so quickly it made her jump. "What is it?" Nadia showed him her notes. "This company, Nightfall Incorporated. They've purchased everything you'd need for the daywalking ritual plus enough to repeat it dozens of times. And look at the shipping addresses." Gavril's eyes widened. "Those are all within 50 miles of the attack compounds." "There's more," Nadia said, pulling up another file. "Nightfall Incorporated is owned by a holding company, which is owned by another holding company. I had to dig through 7 layers of corporate obfuscation, but I finally found the name at the top." She turned her laptop screen to face him. "Theron Ashcroft." For a moment Gavril's face was utterly blank. Then something that might have been pain flashed across his features before his expression locked down into cold fury. "My brother," he said quietly. "All this time it was Theron." "I'm sorry," Nadia said, and she meant it. Whatever else Theron Ashcroft was, he'd been family to Gavril once. This betrayal had to hurt. "Don't be." Gavril's voice was hard as stone. "He made his choice. Now we need to find him before he attacks again." They tracked Theron to an abandoned industrial complex in the Portland outskirts. The building had once been a meat processing plant, which Nadia found grimly appropriate. Gavril insisted minimal backup, just himself, Nadia, and Cassandra. Too many vampires would alert Theron to their presence. They needed the element of surprise. They arrived just after sunset when the sky was still streaked with purple and gold. The building loomed against the fading light, all rusted metal and broken windows. Nadia could feel the wrongness emanating from it, a psychic stench of dark magic and death. "He's here," Gavril said quietly. "I can sense him." They entered through a side door that hung off its hinges. Inside, the plant was a maze of conveyor belts and machinery, all covered in decades of rust and grime, but there were signs of recent occupation, fresh footprints in the dust, the smell of blood, both old and new. "Gavril," a voice called out from the darkness ahead. "I wondered when you'd find me." Theron Ashcroft stepped into view, and Nadia understood immediately why he was Gavril's brother. They had the same pale skin, the same white hair, the same aristocratic features. But where Gavril carried himself with controlled power, Theron radiated chaos. His crimson eyes were wild, almost fevered, and his smile was all madness. "You're looking well, brother," Theron continued. "Still playing at being civilized? Still pretending we're not monsters?" "What you've done is monstrous," Gavril said, his voice deadly calm. "Murdering innocents, destroying the peace. All to prove what? That you were right? That I was too soft?" "To prove that our kind was meant to rule," Theron corrected. "We're immortal, Gavril. Powerful beyond human comprehension. Why should we bow to their laws? Make treaties with our food?" He gestured expansively at the building around them. "I'm building a new order. An army of daywalkers who can hunt whenever we choose. Once the hunter clans are destroyed, once the humans see that vampires can walk in sunlight with impunity, they'll have no choice but to submit." "You've lost your mind," Cassandra said flatly. "Have I?" Theron's gaze shifted to Nadia and his smile widened. "Or have I simply embraced what we are? Tell me, little hunter, how does it feel to work alongside the creature who killed your family?" "Gavril didn't kill them," Nadia said, her hand moving to the blessed silver blade at her hip. "You did. Semantics," Theron said with a dismissive wave. "I used his name, his reputation. In the stories that will be told, it was the Vampire King who destroyed the Graves clan. You can't change that truth." "I can kill you for it," Nadia said. Theron laughed. "You can certainly try." He raised his hand, and suddenly they weren't alone. Vampires emerged from the shadows, dozens of them, all with that same fevered wildness in their eyes. These were Theron's daywalkers, Nadia realized. The ones he'd created with forbidden magic. "I'm disappointed, brother," Theron said to Gavril. "I'd hoped you'd understand. Join me. Together we could rule not just the Western territories but the entire world." "You know my answer," Gavril said coldly. "I do," Theron agreed. "So let's end this the old way. Trial by combat, you and me, brother. Winner takes everything." "No," Nadia said immediately. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Gavril said, his eyes never leaving Theron. "But it's also our only chance. If I defeat Theron, his followers will scatter. The threat ends." He finally looked at Nadia and his expression softened slightly. "Stay back. Let me handle this." Before Nadia could argue, Gavril moved. He crossed the space between himself and Theron in a blur of supernatural speed, and then they were fighting. It was like watching a battle between gods. They moved faster than Nadia's eyes could track, trading blows that would have killed a human instantly. Gavril was a glacier, all controlled power and precise strikes. Theron was a wildfire, chaotic and unpredictable but just as dangerous. Around them, Theron's daywalkers closed in. Cassandra met them with feral grace, her own supernatural speed allowing her to hold off multiple attackers. But there were too many. Nadia drew her blessed blade and joined the fight, using every trick her father and brother had taught her. Silver burned vampire flesh. Aim for the heart or the head. Never let them get behind you. She fought with desperate precision, taking down one vampire then another, but she kept one eye on Gavril and Theron. They'd moved to the center of the plant floor, and their fight had taken on a terrible intensity. Blood black in the dim light splattered across rusted machinery. Gavril was faster, but Theron fought with the recklessness of someone who had nothing to lose. "You were always the better fighter," Theron panted, circling his brother. "But I was always smarter." He pulled something from his coat, a vial of blood that glowed with sickly light. One last dose of innocence. One last transformation. "Don't," Gavril warned, but it was too late. Theron uncorked the vial and drank. The change was immediate and horrifying. Theron screamed, his body convulsing as the magic took hold. His eyes went completely crimson, glowing like coals. His fangs extended until they were as long as daggers, and when he moved again he was even faster than before, a blur of supernatural rage. Gavril barely got his guard up in time. Theron's enhanced strength drove him back, slamming him into a concrete pillar hard enough to crack it. Nadia watched in horror as Theron pressed his advantage, raining down blows that Gavril struggled to block. This was it, Nadia realized. Gavril was going to lose, and when he did, Theron would kill everyone in this building, then move on to destroy every hunter clan and vampire court that opposed him, unless someone stopped him. Nadia made her decision in a heartbeat. She sprinted toward the fighting vampires, her blessed blade clutched in her hand. Cassandra shouted something, a warning or a curse, but Nadia didn't stop. She'd come here to kill the vampire who murdered her family. It was time to finish what she'd started. Theron was so focused on Gavril he didn't see Nadia coming. She leaped onto his back, wrapping one arm around his throat while driving her blessed blade toward his heart. But at the last second, Theron twisted, and the blade that should have killed him instead slashed across his shoulder. He roared in pain and rage, reaching back to grab Nadia and hurl her across the room. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Through blurred vision, she saw Theron turn toward her, saw murder in his glowing eyes. He started toward her and Nadia knew she had seconds to live. Then Gavril was there, interposing himself between Nadia and his brother. "Enough," Gavril said, and his voice carried a weight of command that made every vampire in the room freeze. "This ends now, Theron." "You're right," Theron agreed. "It does." He lunged, but this time Gavril was ready. He sidestepped the attack with perfect precision, grabbed his brother's extended arm and twisted. There was a sickening crack and Theron screamed. Before he could recover, Gavril drove his hand into his brother's chest, grabbed his heart and pulled. It was over in seconds. Theron's scream cut off abruptly. His body convulsed once, twice, then began to crumble. That was how old vampires died, Nadia remembered from her training. They turned to ash and dust, centuries of preserved existence finally catching up to them. Gavril stood in the ruins of his brother, covered in blood and ash, his expression carved from stone. Around them, Theron's daywalkers were fleeing or surrendering, their master's death breaking whatever hold he'd had over them. "It's over," Cassandra said quietly, appearing at Gavril's side. "You won." But Gavril wasn't looking at his second in command. He was looking at Nadia, who was struggling to her feet, clutching her ribs where she'd hit the ground. In 2 strides he was beside her, his cold hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "You could have been killed," Gavril said, and there was something raw in his voice that Nadia had never heard before. "Why would you risk yourself like that?" "Because you were losing," Nadia said. "And because," she trailed off, suddenly unsure how to finish that sentence. "Because?" Gavril prompted. "Because I couldn't watch you die," Nadia admitted. "I came here to kill you, to avenge my family, but you didn't destroy them. You're not the monster I thought you were. She stopped, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. Gavril's crimson eyes searched her face. "I'm what?" "I don't know," Nadia whispered. "I don't know what you are to me. I just know that the thought of losing you makes me feel like I'm drowning." For a moment they stood frozen, vampire and hunter, predator and prey, staring at each other in the ruins of Theron's madness. Then Gavril cupped Nadia's face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle. "I know exactly what you are to me," he said quietly. "You're the woman who walked into my club with murder in her eyes and a silver blade in her clutch. You're the daughter of a man I respected, the hunter who challenged me at every turn, the brilliant investigator who helped me solve an impossible mystery. You're brave and fierce and compassionate, and somewhere over these past weeks, I've fallen completely in love with you." Nadia's breath caught. "You can't love me. I'm human. You're the Vampire King. It's impossible." "I've lived for 273 years, Gavril said. "I've seen empires rise and fall. I've witnessed impossibilities become commonplace. I've learned that love doesn't care about species or status or centuries of tradition." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I love you, Nadia Graves. And if you tell me right now that you feel nothing for me, I'll accept that. But if there's even a chance," Nadia didn't let him finish. She grabbed the lapels of his ruined jacket and pulled him down into a kiss. It was nothing like she'd imagined. Gavril's lips were cold but soft, and he kissed her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. One of his hands slid into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Nadia melted into him, letting herself feel everything she'd been suppressing for weeks: the attraction, the trust, the growing affection that had bloomed despite everything keeping them apart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Nadia was. Gavril didn't technically need to breathe. She rested her forehead against his. I love you too, Nadia whispered. I don't know how it happened. I don't know when revenge turned into something else. But I love you, Gavril Illyrian. Well, Cassandra said from somewhere behind them, this is unexpected. Nadia had forgotten they had an audience. She pulled back from Gavril, blushing, but he kept his arm around her waist, keeping her close. Cassandra, Gavril said, inform the council that the threat has been neutralized. Theron Ashcroft is dead, his daywalkers are captured or scattered, and the evidence of his crimes is secure. And the hunter? Cassandra asked, though her ice-chip eyes had thawed slightly as she looked at Nadia. The hunter is under my protection, Gavril said firmly. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. 3 weeks later, Nadia stood in the Vampire Court's main hall, facing Catherine Blackthorne and the United Hunter Council. She'd presented all the evidence they'd gathered: financial records, survivor testimonies from Theron's captured vampires, even the ritual components they'd found in the Portland warehouse. The council had deliberated for 2 days before calling this final meeting. The evidence is conclusive, Catherine said, addressing both Nadia and Gavril, who stood beside her. Theron Ashcroft orchestrated the attacks on the Hunter clans. Gavril Illyrian and his court are cleared of all charges. Relief flooded through Nadia. She'd been terrified that the council would reject the evidence, that they'd insist on war anyway. However, Catherine continued, this situation has revealed significant weaknesses in our current treaty. The fact that one vampire could cause this much damage, could create an army of daywalkers in secret, suggests we need stronger oversight and communication between our people. Agreed, Gavril said. I propose we establish a permanent liaison position. Someone who can serve as a bridge between vampire and hunter communities, who has the trust of both sides. Did you have someone in mind? Catherine asked, though her slight smile suggested she already knew the answer. Nadia Graves, Gavril said. She's uniquely qualified. She knows both worlds. She's already proven herself capable of working with vampires without compromising her principles, and she has the diplomatic skills her father was known for. Catherine looked at Nadia. Would you accept this position? Nadia thought about it for approximately half a second. Yes, she said. I'll do it. Over the following months, Nadia threw herself into her new role. She mediated disputes between hunters and vampires, helped establish new protocols for reporting rogue vampires, and worked with both communities to strengthen the fragile peace. It was exhausting, frustrating, and deeply rewarding work. And she did it all while navigating a relationship with the Vampire King. Dating Gavril was unlike anything Nadia had experienced. He was impossibly old, brilliant, powerful, and hopelessly romantic in ways that made her heart ache. He courted her like she was royalty, elaborate dates in locations that should have been impossible to access, gifts that were thoughtful rather than expensive, long conversations about everything and nothing that lasted until dawn broke, and he had to retreat to his light-proof chambers. The age difference should have bothered her more than it did. Gavril had been alive for nearly 3 centuries while Nadia was only 24, but he never made her feel young or naive. He valued her opinions, respected her intelligence, and treated her as an equal partner in everything they did together. Tell me about your family, Gavril said one night. They were in his private quarters. Nadia curled against his side on the comfortable couch. Rain lashed against the windows, or rather, against the spelled skylights that let them see the storm from underground. Nadia was quiet for a moment, old grief rising in her chest. But it didn't hurt quite as sharply as it once had. My dad was stern but fair, she said. He believed in duty and honor above everything else. My mom was the warm one. She always knew when I needed a hug or a listening ear. And David, she smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes. David was the best brother anyone could ask for. He was gentle and kind, and he saw the best in everyone. He would have liked you, I think. I wish I could have known him, Gavril said quietly. I wish I could have saved them all. You didn't kill them, Nadia said firmly. Theron did, and he paid for it. Still, Gavril said. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm sorry for your loss. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain. Then Gavril said, I need to tell you something. Something in his tone made Nadia sit up and face him. What is it? The immortality question, Gavril said. We've been avoiding it, but it's time we addressed it. He took her hands in his expression serious. Nadia, you're human. You're going to age while I stay like this. In 40 years you'll be elderly while I still look 30. In 60 years you'll be gone and I'll still be here. Nadia had known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it easier. I know, she said quietly. There are ways to extend human life, Gavril continued. Vampire blood taken regularly in small doses can slow aging. Not stop it, but slow it significantly. Or he hesitated. Or I could turn you, make you vampire, give you immortality. But then I wouldn't be human anymore, Nadia said. No, Gavril agreed. You wouldn't. You'd have to drink blood to survive. You'd burn in sunlight. You'd watch everyone you knew age and die while you stayed young. It's not a gift, Nadia. It's a curse as much as a blessing. Nadia thought about it. The idea of becoming a vampire should have repulsed her. A year ago it would have. But she'd learned so much since then. Vampires weren't monsters, or rather, they didn't have to be. They were people with the same capacity for love and honor and kindness as any human. I don't want to be turned, Nadia said finally. Not yet, anyway. Maybe not ever. I like being human. I like eating real food and walking in sunlight and all the small things that make me who I am. She squeezed his hands. But I'll take the vampire blood, if it means I get more time with you, if it means we can build a life together that's measured in centuries instead of decades. Then yes, I'll do it. Relief washed across Gavril's face. Are you certain? This is a permanent decision, Nadia. Once you start, stopping would cause rapid aging. You'd catch up to your true age in months, I'm certain, Nadia said. I love you, Gavril. I want forever with you, or as close to forever as we can manage. Gavril pulled her into a kiss that was deep and claiming, full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. More than I've loved anyone in my very long life. You're my heart, Nadia Graves. My purpose. My everything. Good, Nadia said with a smile. Because you're stuck with me now. 6 months after that conversation, on a night when the rain poured down in sheets and thunder rolled across the Seattle sky, Gavril took Nadia up to the surface. They stood on the roof of Club Nocturne, getting drenched, the city lights spread out below them like grounded stars. Why are we up here? Nadia shouted over the storm. Because I wanted to do this properly, Gavril shouted back. He pulled a small box from his pocket, somehow still dry despite the rain, and dropped to one knee. Nadia Graves, you walked into my life planning to kill me, and instead you showed me what it meant to truly live. You've given me hope, purpose, and a love I never thought I'd find. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my queen? Nadia stared at the ring in the box, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds that probably cost more than a house, and felt tears mix with the rain on her cheeks. Yes, she said. Yes, of course, yes. Gavril stood and slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss. They stood there in the rain, vampire and hunter, king and liaison, two people from different worlds who'd found each other against all odds. The storm raged around them, but in Gavril's arms Nadia felt perfectly safe. When they finally broke apart, both soaked to the bone, or at least Nadia was, Gavril didn't seem to notice the cold. She laughed. You know, I came to Seattle to destroy you. I know, Gavril said with a smile. I had a whole plan. I was going to stab you, watch you die, and avenge my family. I know that too. Instead, I fell in love with you. Nadia shook her head in wonder. Life is strange. Life is beautiful, Gavril corrected. He kissed her again, softer this time. And I intend to spend the rest of mine making sure you never regret this choice. I won't, Nadia promised. I never could. They married 3 months later, in a ceremony that defied tradition in every possible way. The wedding took place at midnight in the vampire court, with hunters and vampires standing side by side as witnesses. Catherine Blackthorne gave Nadia away, while Cassandra served as Gavril's second. The priest was a vampire older than most countries, who conducted the ceremony in a mixture of Latin and English that was both archaic and beautiful. Nadia wore a white dress that had been her mother's, altered to fit her perfectly. Gavril wore formal black, looking every inch the Vampire King. When they exchanged vows, Nadia's voice shook with emotion, while Gavril's was steady as stone. They promised to love each other across species, across time, across whatever obstacles the world might throw at them. And when the priest pronounced them married, when Gavril kissed her in front of all their assembled people, Nadia felt something settle into place deep in her soul. This was right. This was meant to be. All the pain and loss and struggle of the past year had led her here, to this moment, to this man. The reception was a joyous chaos. Hunters and vampires mingled with surprising ease, united by their respect for the couple. There were speeches. Catherine told embarrassing stories about Nadia's childhood, while Cassandra revealed surprisingly sentimental feelings about her king finding happiness. There was dancing, with Gavril sweeping Nadia across the floor in moves that belonged to a dozen different eras. There was laughter and music and celebration that lasted until dawn broke, and the vampires had to retreat to their light-proof chambers. Gavril and Nadia left for their honeymoon just after sunrise. They went to Gavril's private estate in the mountains, a beautiful modern cabin that somehow combined Gothic architecture with rustic charm. They spent 2 weeks there, completely alone, learning each other in ways they hadn't had time for during their chaotic courtship. Tell me about your turning, Nadia said one night, curled against Gavril's side in their massive bed. You never talk about it. Gavril was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. I was 28, he said finally. It was 1753. In Romania, I was a soldier, wounded in battle and left for dead. My sire found me and offered me a choice: die human, or live forever as something else. I chose life. He smiled slightly. I've had over 2 centuries to contemplate whether that was the right choice. Some days I'm still not sure. Do you regret it? Nadia asked. Not anymore, Gavril said. Meeting you makes every century of existence worthwhile. If I'd died that day in Romania, I never would have found you. So no, I don't regret it. Nadia kissed his chest, right over where his heart would beat if he were still human. Tell me about your sire. Her name was Isabella, Gavril said. She was ancient even then, turned during the Crusades. She taught me everything about being a vampire: how to hunt without killing, how to navigate vampire politics, how to hold on to my humanity despite being something inhuman. She died 50 years ago, challenging an elder vampire who'd been preying on children. She was honorable to the end. I wish I could have met her, Nadia said. She would have loved you, Gavril said with certainty. She always said I needed someone who could challenge me, who wouldn't be intimidated by my power or my title, someone who could see the man beneath the monster. You're not a monster, Nadia said firmly. Sometimes I am, Gavril corrected gently. I've killed Nadia. I've made hard choices that resulted in death. I've executed vampires under my rule who broke our laws. My hands aren't clean. No one who lives as long as you have could have clean hands, Nadia said. But you're not defined by your worst moments. You're defined by how you choose to live now. And right now you're the man who helped me find justice for my family. The man who's working to build peace between vampires and humans. The man who loves me enough to let me stay human. She looked up at him. That's who you are, Gavril, not a monster. A good man trying to do good things in a complicated world. Gavril pulled her up to kiss her deeply. I love you, he said against her lips. My brilliant, fierce, impossibly optimistic wife. I love you too, Nadia said. My dramatic, protective, secretly romantic husband. They made love as the sun rose outside, and Nadia thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been broken and grief-stricken, consumed by thoughts of revenge. Now she was married to the man she'd sworn to kill, working to build peace, looking forward to a future that would last centuries. Life was strange indeed. But it was also beautiful. The years that followed were full and rich. Nadia continued her work as liaison, and her efforts paid off in ways large and small. Hunter attacks on innocent vampires decreased dramatically. Vampire crimes against humans became rare, dealt with swiftly by Gavril's courts before they could escalate. The peace her father had worked for became reality, solidifying until most people forgot there had ever been a time of open warfare between the species. Nadia aged, but slowly. The vampire blood Gavril gave her just a few drops a week, mixed into wine or coffee, kept her young and healthy far beyond normal human limits. By the time she was 40, she looked 30. By the time she was 60, she looked 35. She had time. Time to make a difference. Time to love her husband. Time to build the world they both wanted to see. They had challenges, of course. There were vampires who disapproved of their king marrying a human. Hunters who thought Nadia had betrayed her heritage. There were political crises and diplomatic nightmares and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But they faced it all together, vampire and hunter, king and queen, partners in every sense of the word. Do you ever miss it? Gavril asked her one night, 80 years into their marriage. They were in their private quarters, the room lit by firelight and soft lamps. Nadia was curled against his side exactly as she'd been on their wedding night, though now her hair was streaked with silver and fine lines had appeared around her eyes. Miss what? Nadia asked. Being fully human, Gavril said quietly. Walking in daylight without taking precautions. Eating regular food without the vampire blood affecting your digestion. Growing old at a normal pace. Nadia thought about it. The vampire blood had changed her in subtle ways over the decades. She was stronger than normal humans, healed faster, could see better in darkness. But she also burned more easily in sunlight now. Had to be careful about what she ate. And aged so slowly that she'd had to fake her death twice to avoid questions from distant relatives. Sometimes, Nadia admitted, I miss my brother, I miss my parents, I miss the simplicity of being just human, without complications. She looked up at Gavril. But I don't regret my choice. Not for a second. You're worth it. This life is worth it. Even when it's hard? Gavril asked. Especially when it's hard, Nadia said. The easy things don't matter as much. It's the hard things, the choices we make when it would be simpler to give up, that define who we are. She reached up to cup his face. I chose you, Gavril. I choose you every day, and I'll keep choosing you for as long as I have. Gavril kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache even after 80 years of marriage. I'll love you forever, he promised. Even after you're gone, even if I have to face eternity alone, I'll carry you with me. You've made my immortality meaningful. You've made me more than just a vampire. You've made me whole." "Good," Nadia said with a smile. "That was my plan all along." They laughed together, and the sound filled the room with warmth and light. Nadia died at the age of 143, peacefully in her sleep with Gavril holding her hand. She looked perhaps 65, her body finally succumbing to the aging that the vampire blood could only delay, not prevent. She'd lived longer than any human had a right to, seen wonders she'd never imagined in her youth, and loved more deeply than she'd thought possible. Gavril buried her in the garden of their mountain estate, beneath a willow tree they'd planted together on their 50th anniversary. He stood at her grave for 3 days and nights, neither moving nor speaking, while his coven waited respectfully at a distance. On the 4th day, Cassandra approached him. She was one of the few constants in his life. Now everyone else they'd known had aged and died or moved on. "My king," Cassandra said gently. "You need to feed." "I know," Gavril said. His voice was hollow, emptied of everything that made him who he was. "She wouldn't want you to stop living," Cassandra continued. "She'd want you to keep building the world you created together. Keep maintaining the peace. Keep honoring her memory with action, not grief." Gavril looked at his second-in-command, at this vampire who'd served him for over a century, and managed a small smile. "You're right," he said. "She'd be furious if I gave up now." "She'd probably hit you," Cassandra agreed. Gavril laughed, a broken sound but a laugh nonetheless. "Yes, she would." He looked back at the grave, at the simple headstone that read, "Nadia Graves Illyrian Hunter, Peacemaker, Beloved Wife." "I'll keep going," he said quietly. "For her, because she's worth it." And he did. Gavril ruled for another 2 centuries. Maintaining the peace Nadia had died believing in. He never remarried, couldn't even imagine it. Nadia had been his once in an eternity love, and he'd been lucky enough to have her for over a century. That was more than most people got. He kept her memory alive in everything he did. He established the Nadia Graves Foundation, which funded diplomatic efforts between supernatural species and humans. He commissioned a statue of her for the Vampire Court's main hall. Nadia in her prime, looking fierce and beautiful and compassionate all at once. He told stories about her to anyone who would listen, ensuring that future generations would know about the human woman who'd changed the vampire world. And every year on the anniversary of her death, he visited her grave beneath the willow tree, told her about everything that had happened in the past year, and promised to keep making her proud. "I miss you," he said, on what would have been their 200th anniversary. He was alone in the garden, as he always was for these visits. "Every day I miss you. The world is quieter without your laughter, duller without your fire, lonelier without your presence." He touched the headstone gently. "But I'm still here, still working, still building the future you believed in. And when my time finally comes, when I'm ready to let go of this immortal existence, I like to think I'll find you again. Somewhere beyond death, beyond species, beyond everything that tried to keep us apart. I'll find you, Nadia, and we'll be together again. That's my faith. That's what keeps me going." The wind rustled through the willow branches, and for just a moment, Gavril could have sworn he heard Nadia's voice on the breeze, saying the words she'd spoken to him so many times over their years together. "I love you, Gavril Illyrian, now and forever." He smiled through his tears and knew with absolute certainty that wherever she was waiting for him. And when his long existence finally came to an end, they'd be reunited. Vampire and hunter, king and queen. 2 souls who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last long after they were both gone. The story of Nadia Graves and Gavril Illyrian became legend. They were the vampire and the hunter who chose love over hatred, peace over war, hope over despair. Their legacy shaped the world for generations, proving that even the deepest divides could be bridged with understanding, compassion, and courage. And in the quiet places, in the gardens and halls where their memory lived on, people said you could sometimes feel their presence, a whisper of old love, a reminder that even in a world of darkness and danger, light could always find a way to shine through. Their story was proof that love conquers all, that happy endings are possible even in the darkest circumstances, and that sometimes the person you swear to destroy becomes the person you can't imagine living without. It was a story worth telling, a story worth remembering. A story that would echo through eternity, inspiring others to choose love over hate, peace over violence, and hope over despair. And it all started with a knife still warm from blood, a vow of vengeance, and a kiss in the rain that changed everything.